Let's just paint the picture here. Can you describe the real consequences within a medical setting? Let's discuss if fuel does not come into Gaza.
If fuel doesn't come into Gaza, the hospitals, which are already in the state of collapsing, will completely collapse. Hospitals need fuel for their generators. They need fuel to help babies who are in incubators, ICU patients. I heard earlier today that 130 babies are at risk if fuel is not delivered. It's not just about also treating the people who are injured. I've been hearing from colleagues about doctors having to perform surgeries by the light of a cell phone because there isn't enough electricity to power the lights in the operating room. But it's also about treatment for people with chronic conditions, those with kidney failure who need dialysis. Those people are also at risk. So the need for fuel could not be any more dire. Hospitals are on the verge of collapse, and the international community really needs to step up and insist that fuel be allowed to come in through the Rafah crossing, as we've seen minimal amounts of aid come through in the last few days.
What is the result then? If no fuel reaches Gaza this evening, what is going to happen?
Hospitals are going to collapse. They're already overwhelmed with more patients than they can handle. They are running out of medicine, supplies. Without electricity, they're not going to be able to operate. But it's not just about the hospitals that need fuel. Fuel is a necessity for every part of daily life for Palestinians in Gaza. Fuel is needed to run the generators in the bakeries that are baking bread for the whole society. Fuel is needed to run the water pumps to get water from the pipes into people's water tanks. My colleague Yusuf just told me earlier today about how it took him 4 hours yesterday to figure out how to get 1 liter of fuel out of a friend's car in order to put it in a generator to run a water pump so that he and his family had access to water. Another colleague told me that his generator is running out of fuel and he had to bring a mechanic in to change the set to adapt it so that it could run on cooking gas rather than petrol. The situation is extremely dire. Food is running out. Water is in short supply, and fuel is necessary for being able to bake bread and access clean and drinkable water.
Yeah. Without over dramatizing this, is it safe to say that if hospitals don't get fuel, babies on incubators will die? They'll have no source of incubation at all.
That's right. That is my understanding. There will be the incubators will cease to function. These babies will die within a few minutes is what's likely. You also have patients in the ICUs that are dependent on ventilators and other things. They too will die. This is a catastrophe waiting to happen. And the reality is that there are things that the international community can do. This isn't a natural disaster. This is a man-made disaster, and we need to be pushing for fuel to be getting in and reach those in need, including those at the hospitals.
So the condition for which the Rafah crossing was open from Egypt into Gaza and that aid was allowed in was that it wouldn't be fuel, it would be medicine, food, water, but not fuel. And the accusation here is that Hamas is stockpiling hundreds of thousands of litres of fuel. What do we know about the validity of that claim? Is that something you've heard? Has there been any evidence of that?
I've heard that. I haven't seen evidence verifying that. But regardless of whether it's true or not, the reality is that there are 2.3 million civilians living in Gaza who have no control over anything that is happening to them. Here, the international community, the Egyptians, Israel can allow for fuel to come in. It's not an impossibility. It's something that can be done in order to save people's lives. And regardless of what Hamas does or doesn't do, the international community has an obligation, a moral obligation, to act in order to prevent human and civilian suffering.
And the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, today has called for a humanitarian pause for aid. He's not the only one. That is a collective approach somewhat by many of the world leaders. Is a humanitarian pause for aid, is that going to be enough, Shaina?
I don't think it will be enough, but it needs to be a start if that's what we can get. At this point, we've seen this tiny trickle of aid coming into Gaza. It's nowhere near the 100 trucks per day at minimum that are needed to sustain and meet the humanitarian needs of the 2.3 million people living in Gaza. But in order for that aid to be able to reach people, humanitarians need to have assurances of their safety. And the people going to seek that aid at distribution points also need to have assurances of their safety. So if we can't get a complete de-escalation or a ceasefire, then we at the very least need to have a humanitarian pause so that humanitarians, such as my colleagues at the Norwegian Refugee Council, can go out and do what we're meant to do, which is provide for the needs of people who are struggling.